With 2026 right around the corner, the political stakes are rising ever higher. Of recent, Honorable Hon Mao, the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, has tabled a number of reforms that seek to alter the entire realm of the electoral system and in Uganda. Among these include put in place a 2-term limit for women members of parliament. Another is to institute an electronic voting system. Another being a shift from citizen-based election of the president to a parliamentary system. And then we also have him putting together a system to regulate further the military and public servant engagement with elections. And then another is to regulate the campaign fundraising during campaign season. So with all these electoral and constitutional reforms being tabled, the question today is, what is the women's perspectives on these electoral reforms? What will be the impact? What change do we envision it will bring, if even any? With me in studio, I have a very illustrious panel to discuss this very engaging manner. I shall introduce them from my extreme left, coming back in. So to my extreme left, I have Ms. Cissy Mukyala Anoonya, who is an independent management consultant. Cissy, good afternoon and welcome to the show.
Good afternoon so much, our viewers. Glad to be here.
Thank you. And then right next to her, we have Charity Ahimbisibwe, who is the Executive Director of Electoral Laws and Governance Institute. Good afternoon, Charity, and welcome to the show.
Good afternoon to our viewers and to my fellow panelists and to the people on the camera. I'm happy to be in the studio.
Very happy to have you with us. Right next to me is Miss Georgia Tumwesigye, who works with FOWODE as the Women and Leadership Programs Manager. Welcome, Georgia.
Thank you very much, our host, and good afternoon, dear viewers and my fellow panelists. Happy to be here.
Okay, thank you. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to dive right into the show. My name is Turiho Danita, your host. So, Charity, I will start right with you. These electoral reforms, just jumping in, do we need them? And if so, are these the right ones that we actually need as a country?
Mm-hmm. So electoral reforms, Anita, are meant to help electoral processes. Mm-hmm. If you look at elections world over, every after an election, there are reforms. Mm-hmm. Even in the United States, there are reforms. Even in Ghana, there are reforms. Mm-hmm. In Zambia, South Africa, Uganda shouldn't be an exception. Mm-hmm. Why do we have reforms? Reforms are simply meant to tighten the nose on what didn't go well with the previous election. Mm-hmm. Every election comes with its own challenges. And so the next election should improve from the last election. However, what has been the historical perspective for Uganda's elections? Uganda's elections, the judges have spoken on very many occasions. They first spoke in 2001 in Kizza Besigye versus YK Museveni. And those reforms were never instituted wholly. Mm-hmm. Just partial institution of those reforms happened. In 2006, again, the judges pronounced themselves. That was after the 2006 elections. Still, there were partial reforms that were picked up and instituted by government. Always government looks at the low-hanging fruit or at reforms that they think benefit them, but not necessarily the whole electoral system. Mm-hmm. Now, elections are a process. They can be determined way before the day of voting using a system of elimination, a system of discrimination against different facets of those who are meant to participate in the process. So if you look at the judgments of 2001, 2006, 2011 we did not go to court because Kizza Besigye decided that he was going to do what we call walk to work. Mm-hmm. So he didn't go back to court. And so in 2016, the Honorable Amama Mbabazi went back to court and the judges made 16 recommendations of how we need to improve our electoral processes. Amongst them was the question of how to use technology in elections. And I'll explain to you in detail what the judges said about technology. And so you say, where we find ourselves before 2026. are the reforms what we need, and they have to come at this time? If you look at that judgment of 2016 that I refer to, the judges said the reforms are supposed to happen the second year into the term, the new term. Yes. So the new term started after 2021. 2021 was to 2022 was 1 year. 2022 to 2023 was 2 years. So those reforms were supposed to come in the year 2023. They didn't come. Now it's 2024 and it is September. We have a voter register update process in January 2025. That is just 4 months away from now. Every reform you will institute now in September will not be able to be carried efficiently in the processes of 2025. I will tell you that in January of 2025, we are going to elect subcommittees that are going to lead the elections of special interest groups. Who are the special interest groups? The youth, PWDs, who else? The elderly, the military. All these groups, even workers, those are special interest groups. Now, those elections of those people go through what we call electoral college system. And the electoral college system starts from the village level through to the national level. So we have to elect the committees that are going to carry out these elections, right from village level to sub-county level to district level and then national level. Those committees are being elected in January. So if you look at how that roadmap is running, and we're still in the process of reorganizing of polling stations. Once we are done with the process of reorganizing polling stations, if you do a reform, it means we go back to the drawing board and restart the roadmap. But do we have the time to be able to do the activities that we have to do ahead of 2026 and ensure a fair process for everybody who has to be involved? We don't have that time. That's why the judges advised on the question of time, that it is important it comes in the second year of an electoral cycle. So, one, we are late for the reforms. And we are late for technology reform. Why are we late for technology? Technology can work both ways. It can be a good reform that improves the process, but it can be a bad reform that doesn't improve the process. I will tell you about Kenya. Kenya had electronic systems across the whole board. And after voting, the Kenyans were able to tell at every polling station how much Raila Odinga had received and how much Ruto had received in terms of votes. And so they could tally for themselves across the country because they know how many polling stations there are, and each of them had access to the results. And so they had mechanisms of telling who had won. But even when they had that number, that level of technological advancement in the election, they could not agree who had won the election. And even when the announcement was made, there was a lot of doubt because those who tallied at first produced Raila. The PVT that was done by civil society organizations, PVT is a parallel voter tabulation. It's a method that is used, it's highly electronic. You access the results, run a system across them, and then produce the results. That PVT produced Ruto as the winner of this result. Now this is civil society. So when civil society was being asked, so really Ruto won this election, the guys of Raila were saying, for us, we have our data, we have our data center, we were able to analyze all this data. So what happens with technology? Technology can break or make an election. Remember, elections are high-stake issues. Everybody is involved in them. Everybody has a candidate they are supporting, and they believe in that candidate to win. And there are those who do not believe their candidate might win, but they are giving it their best shot. The thing which is advantageous about technology, although the judges said, look, how Electoral Commission should use this technology is not clearly defined in our laws. And the Interpretation Act does not clearly specify how to interpret which type of technology to be used in elections. And even the Electoral Commissions Act does not also define what type of technology, because look, we have TikTok, we have all these digital forums.
Yeah.
We have which other one? We
Instagram,
have Facebook, we have
Facebook.
Telegram, we have Facebook, we have
Snapchat.
X, we have Snapchat. Hey, let's go, guys. Let's go. We are together. Let's go to other YouTube. So, which ones are we using? And is it possible that there can be fakes in this technology? Is it possible that we can even change results using
System
technology?
manipulation.
Can we go into the system when we know it and we change certain results in a polling station? How do we ensure that this technology is not playing games with us?
Yes.
So this is what the judges said. The judges said, ensure that the type of technology you're going to use is defined. The people understand it. Those who are participating in the process know it. Because if you have a portal where you're saying you're collecting all the data from, remember in 2021 that when the chairperson of the Electoral Commission would receive the results, people had been picking results at polling stations. Everybody picks results at polling stations. And if I come from a district like Kayunga, I collect all the results from the polling stations in Kayunga because I am passionate about knowing what is happening in Kayunga. Oh, I am an observer and I want to know. Now, from the results I am seeing from the polling stations that I picked, I cannot relate with what I am seeing the chairperson of the Electoral Commission announcing. But the chairperson of the Electoral Commission is saying, this is what was amalgamated by my polling officials and my polling assistants, and this is the final result that I have. So the tabulation of those results became a problem. Even the chairperson himself was not able to explain very well where the numbers were coming from. Now, in 2016, the judges were saying, no, we should never have such a scenario. We should not have a scenario where people are not sure about the numbers and how they are being tallied. We should have a scenario where people see, they follow through from the polling station. They can go to the National Tally Center and see their Kalito polling station called Naria Primary School, showing 176 votes for Charity. And they can relate back and say it's actually true, Charity polled that number. Not just see a blanket number, 1 million votes from, let's say, Charlie Wajala. They have now given you a lump sum for Charlie Wajala. And so you're asking, okay, can we see the small polling stations in Charlie Wajala? And you can't. And they're telling you, our technology system cannot allow you to see the detail of the last polling station. That already creates doubt.
Yeah.
Elections are supposed to be transparent processes. Transparency is a key tenet of electoral processes. So if you ask me, he's suggesting technology, that's the Honorable Norbert Mao, that we need improved technology call systems across the electoral process. It is a good reform, but the time at which it comes is short. The buying of that equipment, training of the people who will use the equipment and the systems needs to have already taken place like now, because you need polling assistants who will know how to use that technology. We failed to use BBVK. In 2021, we used BBVK and it had a high failure rate of up to 60% of polling stations where BBVK wouldn't work, and we went back into the manual form. They closed off the BBVK system. That was a basic system. It was just meant to say every person can only be identified by their thumbprint. Meaning that even if a person wanted to vote as Charity, you would not afford to. Because the system there only has my thumbprint. So these things of where people said, I arrived at the polling station and all ballots had been ticked, would not arise. That would not arise at all because of BBVK system. So the first place we need to start is, can we improve that BBVK system to work 100%? Because that one we understand it. Secondly, where the BBVK puts the data, can observers, can citizens have access to that data, that it becomes more trusted, even when it is being read by the Electoral Commission, that it tallies with their polling stations. Now, the new technology that could come up can be used to do what it did to Kenya. Up to now, the Kenyans have never agreed if actually Ruto won the election.
Thank you so much, Charity. That, I think, touched on so much of this conversation quite brilliantly, quite eloquently. Very grateful. So, Georgia, I will bring you into the conversation right now. There have been so many reforms that have been tabled. Aside from the electronic system, there is one that is particularly disturbing, especially as a woman, which is a term limit for women only. It is quite ironic that we have that coming into place in a country that, not so long ago had the term limit for the presidency removed. And so my question would be, it's quite broad actually. Why the women? And to what end what would be the end goal of all this happening? Both on the women, but also as a nation, but also on the political realm. What would be the end goal? And then just any other thoughts you have on this particular concept.
Okay, thank you very much, our host. And dear viewers, once again, my name is Georgia Tumwesigye. I work with the Forum for Women in Democracy. It's a national women's rights organization that pursues a vision of a just and fair society where women and men equally participate in and benefit from decision-making processes. I am excited about your question, mostly because the Forum for Women in Democracy is as old as Uganda's constitution, because we were born out of the 1995 constitution-making process. And so next year we make 30 years, next year the constitution makes 30 years. What has happened over time? First off, I want to agree with Charity on the timing. The timing of these reforms is highly suspicious, yes, because we know that the electoral roadmap is already out. The EC last year launched their strategy and released an electoral roadmap that has actually already been revised. It was revised at the end of July this year because they were not meeting particular timelines and so on. Demarcation of polling and electoral areas has already happened. If you went online to be able to check and supervise, because we have been engaging in partnership with the Uganda National NGO Forum and 13 other implementing partners across sub-regions to implement what we call a program or activity, USAID-funded, strengthening citizens' engagement in elections. And the forward perspective is mostly to enhance the participation of women in all electoral processes. Because the electoral process already started. Many people tend to believe that, election day, actual voting in 2026 is what the election is about. But before I even answer your question, we need to think about the constitution was formed and, they put in place norms and regulations that would form what we call the social contract with Ugandans. Your question about, or even this reform, I just want to take you back through the processes that the Forum for Women in Democracy, together with the NGO Forum, have been engaging in. So we undertook a multi-stakeholder process and consulted citizens in all 13 sub-regions of Uganda. And we formed what we call the CS opposition paper on constitution and electoral reforms to enhance. And I just want to show this to the citizens. It is online, can be accessed across all websites. Okay. This was published last year in June 2023. And our Honorable Minister of Constitutional Affairs was in attendance together with the Electoral Commission Chairperson. He knows the electoral reforms that the citizens are interested in. The one on, women MPs having 2 term limits, these are the district representatives, having just a maximum of 2 terms, is not among what the citizens want. I want to applaud him on bringing on board reinstating presidential term limits because, you know, each president should serve a term of 5 years and not exceed 2 terms.
Yeah.
And that should be across the board, not just for women MPs. It should start from presidential to parliament and to all the other local government levels. And that is what fairness is about. The key constitutional reform that the people, and actually the women of Uganda, when you look at the Women's Manifesto that we developed in partnership with the Uganda Women's Network, we are saying we want gender parity in the parliament of Uganda. How will gender parity be achieved? This is in our constitutional reforms, the ones that citizens want, not the ones that Mao is tabling now, this late in the electoral cycle. And gender parity can be achieved by ensuring that each constituency is represented by 2 MPs, a man and a woman. And constituency in this form, we mean a district, because we know that there are constituencies that have voters who are below 150,000. And we are saying that those ones should be merged. I don't know if there's any district that has below 150,000 voters. If those are there, they should be merged. So we're saying each district should be a constituency, and each constituency should be represented by 2 people. We will then have 50-50. Beyond having gender parity, it will cut down the number of MPs from 557 all the way to just a little over 200. That would also reduce our money. I'm speaking as a taxpayer now. You know, the operational costs of running the parliament right now are crazy.
Yeah.
And so, you know, just to achieve gender parity, but also in fairness and what the citizens want, you know, we should have 2 members of parliament per district, and the district in this case would be the constituency. We are too late. We are too late this time. They haven't even been tabled before Parliament as we speak right now. September is ending this week. We are getting into October. At what point will any of the reforms be enacted or actioned upon? And so it is suspicious. Some of what is being presented is more like a painkiller really to the process. But I don't think there is even political will beyond the time being short to actually action you know, when we speak about the term limits, when you look at, you know, just digitizing the electoral process, because there are some other processes that should have happened before. You know, when you, for example, look at transferring the powers to the parliament to be able to elect the president of Uganda, that goes against Article 1 of the Constitution, because Article 1 of the Constitution says power belongs to the people who will exercise it in accordance with the Constitution. Now, the members of parliament can only legislate on our behalf, but they cannot elect the president of Uganda on our behalf. That takes away, you know, that is actually raping Article 1 of the Constitution. And, you know, it has gone through multiple defilements, the Constitution of Uganda. And so, I mean, it would not be surprising, but this is something that the citizens of Uganda should not even allow, give even room for debate, because, you know, the power belongs to the people, and we are the sovereign. You know, if I'm to put it that way, the power is in our hands, and so we should be the ones to be able to exercise. But also to say there are clauses and articles in the Constitution that should not just be touched by even our members of parliament, much as they represent us. You know, things like presidential term limits, lifting them in the first place should have required a referendum, so that the people speak, the people are able to vote on the issue as is. I submit.
Thank you so much, Georgia. Follow-up question. You mentioned that these are the reforms, based off of the study you did.
Yeah.
These are the reforms the people want, not what Honorable Mao has tabled. What exactly do the people want? I want you to delve deeper for us into your report. I think we need to understand.
So they are quite a number, and I'm going to invite. So one of them really is about reinstating term limits, and on that we do agree with him. So the term limits, not just presidential, across across the board. We also needed to amend the Constitution. The people demanded for, you know, the Constitution to be amended to limit the powers of the presidency. So we needed to establish a mechanism where the people who are appoints actually go through public scrutiny, not just parliament, so that the people have a stake. The people are saying, we have voted as the public, and, at the end of the day, the person who gets appointed is someone that the public approves of, not just the Parliament of Uganda. And if all the appointees are not, we don't consider them suitable to represent our interests, then he would have to go back to the drawing board, and or the public would be able to even, suggest some names. The role of the military in the elections.
But I think something you're leaving out there, and Mao, I think, touches it, is the person of the Electoral Commission.
Yes,
and Mao
I was
says
going to
that
go
the
to it.
Electoral Commission should not be just elected by the president, because he is a participant in the process. So where does the fairness come from? When you are a participant, but you're the one who appoints them, their allegiance will be more to you. And I think civil society has made this point over a number of years, from 2016, when we did the Citizens Manifestos. Georgia, I'm sorry.
No. That is okay.
I don't always want to do
because the Electoral Commission, that's why I was talking about all the appointees, including Electoral Commission, are supposed to be voted through a public process. With the powers of the president to sign off the appointees. But also political parties had come together to say that all political parties should be represented right from the national level at the Electoral Commission up to down the district level, just to be fair. Elections are supposed to be credible, regular, fair, free and fair. The only thing that Uganda has achieved so far is that we have, since 1995, we have been having regular elections. About the credibility, highly in question, the fairness and the freedom, that is something that needs to be, doesn't even need to be discussed. When you go into the regions, there's a lot of apathy now. The citizenry is highly disengaged because, they even tell you we can anticipate what the election is going to be like. We had quite a number, there's something about commercialization, and I'm happy that Mao is also talking about it, where we said, the parliament should enact a specific law to regulate campaign financing and spending, so the donations that are made during the electoral cycle, those ones need to be curbed. We said the principles to guide the law should include transparency, accountability, and disclosure, and providing incentives to citizens, contributing funds to candidates like tax waivers. So we needed to understand all that in place. So we needed to regulate giving of donations during election periods, regulate campaign financing to ensure equal-leveled campaign field. Then the unequal use of state-owned media. You have seen so many times where it is very difficult for the opposition to even get space to advertise anything on the UBC. And yet this belongs, to the people of Uganda. We finance this through our taxes. But, I know there's someone who risks being fired just by providing a platform. Even on the local radio stations that are not state-owned, the moment they hear there is a key opposition leader who is about to have a talk show, they will surround the radio station, they will, put them off air, threaten and intimidate them. And so we also make moves in line with that. And, the Constitution and Presidential Elections Act should be amended to strengthen access to state-owned media through sanctions against any media house and its officers for violation. There are quite a number. We also needed to amend the Constitution to remove the UPDF representation. Because I don't understand what the army is doing in Parliament, because we have them everywhere else anyway. There are quite a number. Also reducing the size of Parliament, as I had said earlier. Reducing the size of Parliament can only be achieved through, gender parity, ensuring that we have 2 representatives, a man and a woman, per constituency. I am going to share this back with you so that Civic Space can actually publish this as well. It is on our different sites. When you go to the site of NGO Forum and FOWODE, you'll be able to get a copy of this. We also had something about ministers who double as MPs, because then you'll find yourself in the legislature, but then also you're in the executive. So we needed a separation of powers. And these are all reforms suggested by the citizens, but also the different courts every other election cycle put in place reforms, as Charity had earlier said.
Okay, thank you so much. So yeah, just one more time. How many districts was this carried out in? How large was your?
This was in over 100 districts in 14 sub-regions. So there was Ankole, Acholi, Teso, Sebei, Bukedi, Bunyoro, Toro, West Nile. It's really all the sub-regions of Uganda. And the participation was over 2 million Ugandans. Yeah.
Okay, quite
So that's a
comprehensive.
representative voice.
Yeah.
If we are to go into that.
Yes,
Yeah.
quite a comprehensive analysis. Thank you so much, Georgia. Cissy, I'll bring you into the conversation at this point. One of the situations we have going on right now, and I think the other panelists have touched on it, is that we are now seeking to shift from citizens voting the president directly to the parliament voting them in. It's a very controversial question. As citizens, as participants in Uganda, as Ugandans actually, it's quite the question. So my question to you would be, how viable is it? Who do we benefit from it? Will it actually, alter the system, the political system in Uganda for the better? And have we seen this happening in Uganda before?
Thank you so much, Anita. When I look at that particular reform, it is against the rights of people to vote under Article 1 of our Constitution. And you're all aware that from the time the president came to lead us, I can say lead, not rule, he has always been and he has advocated for people's rights and look at democracy. In my own opinion, I believe that whatever it is that we are discussing is important, but one, it has not been tabled before Parliament, and that particular one of getting the voting powers to Parliament, I believe the chances of it being thrown out. Why? The president believes in masses. Parliament has only approximately 550 voters if we are to take the voting rights to Parliament. So how sure are we that all these 550 electoral candidates have gone through the right process to get into that? We are looking at election rigging. We are looking at ballot filling, like where confusion happens in maybe the transportation of ballot boxes, and things change, results change abruptly. So like chances of these people representing us are very minimum. And considering the fact that the ruling party has more seats in Parliament, it actually strips us naked of our rights to vote, because the Speaker herself is not only an advocate, but a member of the ruling party. So this gives a particular party more powers and a bigger advantage to rule this country until forever comes. Then when I look at still that, I'm looking at the fact that there are more male representatives in Parliament, and we are women. The president has always advocated for women participating in almost everything. So this will affect our abilities to contribute to national decision-making, especially with more men choosing who the president is going to be. What chances will other parties have in the first place? Do we even need these parties in Uganda? Can we just declare that we are a one-party system? Because with over, how many are they? Over 300 NRM MPs. Like, that is automatic that they'll vote for the president of their choice. And when we look at the 2021 elections of speakers, we look, the media is littered with news of intimidation, bribery, and false accusations just to force people into voting a particular candidate. We see the speaker, the former speaker, Right Honorable Kadaga, being thrown out. But chances are high, if it was free, maybe she would have if it was a free election, chances are high that she would have what? She would have won. Then still on that, our determining organs are not independent. The Electoral Commission head is appointed by the president. And remember, when voters are not happy, we run to the Electoral Commission. But we are running to the Electoral Commission, which was appointed by the president. From there, we got, maybe if we are not content with that, we can run to the judiciary, who appoints the chief judge. Still the same president. So how, you cannot convince me beyond doubt that we are going to have free, fair, inclusive elections with that. Yes, that is my submission.
You know, as Cissy was speaking about just throwing out the multi-party system, which, and yet we had a referendum where I remember I was very young, but so I didn't participate in the referendum. But now, even as we're discussing with citizens, and this is something that, you know, we didn't pick up because it didn't have very many, I would say, support in the community, is that before we used to have value-driven leaders, actual leaders that would, you know, front the people's interests. And so the citizens were saying that the multi-party system has sort of changed that, because even when you know that the candidate, your flag bearer, is not going to do an amazing job in parliament, your loyalty to the party forces you to sort of support them. Whereas before, in what they called the movement system, you know, you're contesting as an individual, and so it's about you. And at the time, I think even the monetization beyond just the commercialization of elections was limited. So as she was speaking, you know, I just thought of that, the value-driven leaders. Where does that come in? Where does that come on board? And also, so beyond just representing in parliament, who are you? If we did a social poll right now, an opinion poll, you will find that many citizens right now, even when you just look at the social media comments whenever parliament passes anything, the apathy, but also the lack of trust now in the people who are representing us, is something to just look into.
Georgia, still to add on that, like when we embrace that, which I'm not okay with anyway, when we embrace the fact that it is an electoral body to vote for the president, chances are high that, one, the operational costs of voting will come down, right? But again, this will be at a very high cost for the citizens, because at the end of the day, I am seeing a monarch being put in place. Reason being that a particular section of the population is able to facilitate. They're able to be godparents to these politicians. So how sure are you that, okay, maybe you've been my godparents in like campaigns. How can I vote against you? Everything can be referred. We can refer to the elections of the speaker before we even opt for the electoral body to vote for the president. I've seen that work in a particular organization where I started from. And if it was that particular system employed, maybe things would happen differently. But chances are high that we have lost trust in many things.
But, you know, it's very interesting that we mention that the parliament will be voting the executive leader. It's quite controversial, especially legally speaking. We ought to have a separation of powers, and yet here in Uganda we constantly see an intersection. And as we've heard from our 2 million people who we would assume are representative of the people of Uganda, it is quite disturbing. It is not what the people want. So, Charity, I'll bring you in from that angle, the legal angle of it all. All these reforms that we have being tabled, from parliament to the women to the electronic system, all of them have a legal underpinning. All certain reforms must take place legally. Constitutional reforms are not something to simply, you know, brush away. It requires the grand norm of our nation is going to be altered. Now, I just want you to simplify for the audience what exactly it means, what exactly the processes that will be to see this come to fruition, or what they ought to be. Well, so we saw it when we were altering the term limits of the presidency, but Georgia has mentioned that even that was controversial. I think a few people would agree that that was the case. So what exactly, very simplistically, are the legal processes that would take place for all these reforms to come to pass?
And I want to start just at what happened with the lifting of Article 102B. Civil society organizations moved across this country, and they even went to Parliament. I remember I was very pregnant, and we walked to the gallery, and we presented the views we had collected from across the country. Ugandans were saying, let's just not remove the age limit, because we had safety nets in our constitution. And Ugandans were saying, look, we are not targeting President Museveni even. We are thinking about posterity. Because if you look at the preamble of our constitution, it starts by saying that recalling our violent history of bloodshed, where we lost almost everybody when we were killing each other. Today we have promulgated this constitution, and we choose that we shall be guided by this document going forward on our democracy. So Ugandans said, look, when you take away those safety nets from the constitution, what it means is when President Museveni is not around, we go back to the bloodshed. And we are saying there are many young people who don't know about bloodshed, and so they don't even care what happened. And so they want the stable Uganda they saw President Museveni bringing in. So let's stick with term and age limit. But by that time already term limits was out. But we continued to agitate for it anyway. Even Parliament agreed, Kadaga's Parliament before the Speaker, Neta Among's Parliament came on. They agreed and said, no, actually there is no problem, let's bring back the term limits. So it was already an agreed position. So the young people in Parliament, the bigger issue was at the time when we were saying Toji Kwatako, Justice Bat Katurebe, when we went to the Supreme Court, he realized that what they had arrived at was a bit complicated. The first hearing had been in Mbale with the Chief Justice now, Owinidol. And still civil society was blocked to go to Mbale. But guess what? We sat in taxis. We gave up on our cars. Everybody went to the park. We picked bags and went to Mbale in a taxi. Reason why we had to do that is because now they had put the military across saying, make sure you look out for these civil society cars and stop them. And so we went as ordinary as possible. Once we got to Mbale, we did not even gather in groups as people who know each other. We slept in different houses of relatives, friends. If you had a relative, we asked you, do you have another one who can host, another person who can host? So we slept like 1 or 2 people scattered across the place and never communicated at all on our phones. We just knew we had to appear in court in the morning. Now they had told the police, make sure this place has these people who like shouting. They are just shouters. That's what they were calling us. But each of us wore smartly in our suits and were inside the place. By the time Owinidolo got into the hall to the court in Mbale, it was flooded. He said, where did all these people come from? Then they told him they are citizens of this country. We don't know. He said, no, you are not supposed to allow civil society here. He said, but they are citizens. These are citizens from Mbale. The reason they had taken the hearing to Mbale was to stop the so-called activists in Kampala, who were the noisemakers, not to be able to raise the issues that had to be raised by citizens. Our point was made. It didn't matter that they lifted age limit. We wrote documents. We said you should not lift it. We explained why the age limit had to stay as a safety net in the Constitution, and that record is there permanently. When Justice Bat Katurebe got to read the final reading, he said, my eyes have got a problem. I have to go to South Africa for treatment. You see, he was beginning to feel guilty. The guilt was working him. The court, before I said the house, the court was completely crowded with citizens of this country saying, we want to hear this court betray us. And so he fell sick and he said, I will not read my own judgment. And he passed it on to somebody else to read it. That was good enough for us. That too spoke volumes. It means he understood what we were saying. And so the reforms went ahead. But even when they went ahead, Mao is saying, okay, can we have one of the safety nets back? And we say it's a welcome move. It's a very good welcome move because we are saying it is there. But what is the process supposed to be? So when you look at the 1995 Constitution, it was coming from somewhere. Yeah. Like I said, the preamble does set the pace for that Constitution. The year 1966 in Uganda was a year of turmoil. A lot of fighting. Kabaka's palace was invaded by the army forces of Idi Amin. And once they invaded Kabaka's palace and got the Kabaka out, they deported the Kabaka. A lot of constitutional changes started to take place. We had a pigeonhole constitution. Yeah. Then immediately after that, there was no agreement at all on the political scene. Every political party was suspicious of the next political party. Then we started seeing Amin come onto Amin took power and ruled this country by decree, and so many things went wrong. We did not have one document that would govern Ugandans for which they felt they were connected to. People were dying, people were locked up in booths, people lost their fathers. The whole place was turmoil. And that went on until the NRM government came into power. And when the NRM government came into power, they said, you know, we need to heal the turmoil of the past by promulgating a constitution that represents the people. This is where the people now comes from. And if you look at jurisprudence in the School of Law, jurisprudence does tell you that, you see, in democracy, people are central. Even if you don't go to jurisprudence and you've gone to a social science class, you've gone to a political science class, or you've gone to a historical class, you've had this definition. Democracy is the government of the people.
By the people.
For the people.
Yes.
The reason why they say it is by the people, for the people, of the people. Those are just English terminologies to mean what it actually means. It is by us, the people, we the people of Uganda. This day we choose to do what? To be governed by the Constitution. It is the people of Uganda who agreed. It was not the members of parliament.
No.
And once it was the people of Uganda, they will secede some of their power. Now I am in Article 1. They will secede some of their power to the members of parliament. Meaning, I pick some of my power and give you to go and represent my views, because not all of us, the 42 million, can sit in parliament. So they are acting on your behalf. So if you look broadly at a parliamentary system and a presidential system, this is why Uganda chose the presidential system. Uganda chose the presidential system because in the past, parliamentary system had been tried and it didn't work. Yes. It had caused a lot of chaos in the post-colonial period, during the time when Obote was leading this country. And so because that representative kind of system had not worked for Uganda, the NRM government comes and says, no, for us, we came as a people's government. If you look at Article 237 of the Constitution, they say land shall be held in trust for the people of Uganda. So who holds the land in trust for the people of Uganda? The government. So everything is held in trust for the people. The judiciary will make judgments on behalf of the people. Everything is the people from the beginning of that Constitution to the end of that Constitution. So if you say you're going to now elect by a representative system, you have to change a lot of that Constitution. Yes. A lot of wordings of that Constitution have to change to fall in tandem with a representative government and begin to cut off the powers of the people. But is that what Ugandans want? Because at the end of the day, it is Ugandans who have to determine what they want with their Constitution. It's not Charity, it's not Georgina, it's the whole of Uganda has to decide what they want with that Constitution. Now, Article 59 is the one that actually provides for our right to vote. That if you're 18 years of age, you have a right to vote. But Ugandans, in the extent of this vote, should understand that this one time in 5 years is when you get to pronounce yourself on who can best represent your views in the leadership spectrum. Because you're saying, me as Charity, I might not be president of Uganda, but the one person who can represent what I think I want for this country is this president. And so you vote for them. Is this member of parliament? You vote for them. Is this woman MP? You vote for them. Now, we also, you've asked me systematically to look at what would be the process.
Yes.
The process is that you must consult the people extensively. Consulting the people doesn't mean I come to my constituency like was done in Article 102B, just a few constituencies consult, and when the people say no, you go to Parliament and change the position. Because there are many MPs who change the position of what the people had told them.
Yes.
But there are also MPs who said, you people wait a minute, like Connie Galiwango of Mbale. The reason she was brought back is because the people told her go and say no. If everybody has said yes for you, you say no. If you say yes, we will not vote you back. Connie came, she was torn. Honestly, she had wanted to say yes, but the people had warned her and had told her, you will never step that house again. When she reached Parliament, she said, you people, I'm between a rock and a hard place, and I will say this. My people have asked me to say no to Article, to lifting of Article 102B. And so I go with the people because it is them who vote for.
Even my constituency member of parliament in Rukunjiri consulted us. We said no. We saw her on TV saying the people of Rukunjiri have said yes. We didn't wait.
They didn't return her.
No, we could not.
You see?
You know?
So do you see?
We could not.
So it's not that the people of Uganda do not know
what they want.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The people of Uganda know what they want. And
Yes.
because this constitution was promulgated for the people of Uganda, anything you do that you want to change that constitution and to change the way things are being governed, you must go back to these people. If you don't, and you just do what Amin did, and you do what Obote did, you know that we have a history.
Yeah.
That history can so easily come back.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to take so long. It will work from our historical perspective and it will catch up with us. We have ghosts that have followed us for so many years and they still linger about. It is possible that the ghost of from 1962 through to 1986, 1995, when we promulgated this constitution, can so easily come back.
Yeah.
So if we want to guard against that and galvanize the gains that President Museveni has gotten for this country, then we need to carefully go back to the people, ask them on what their position is and go with the position of the people. That is in terms of presidential system vis-a-vis the representative or parliamentary system. Now, when it comes to the women, for the women, when you suggest this, the women being elected as women representatives in the 146 districts is a quota system. And it was meant, quota systems the world over are used for a period of time and then put aside if they have attained what they were supposed to achieve. Like, for example, affirmative action of 1.5 for us to go to university, which they used to add to every female student, was reviewed. The reason they review is to ask, have we superseded the number we had wanted of girls to join university? If we haven't superseded, we proceed with that affirmative action of 1.5. But if we have superseded, what type? Now we begin to ask ourselves questions of equity. So when we achieve equality, we talk about equity. But now, in terms of the reform that is being suggested, it seems discriminatory. It is only targeting the woman member of parliament seat. If this reform targeted all the parliamentary seats, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Why? Because it means that we have members of parliament who have been in that parliament. Theodora Sechkuba has been there for 20 years. Wilbrod has been there for almost 20 years. Wilfred Nwaga, he has been there for almost 20 years. We have Honorable Kadaga, she has been there for almost 20 years. We have MPs who are there, who have been there for 20 years. I can even show you their pictures, their names, and we know people who have been in that house for 20 years. Now, if you've been in that house for 20 years and you've not achieved for your people in 20 years, why are you there? You see, those are the questions that Ugandans should be asking themselves. Now, if this reform therefore says all MPs, those 20-year-old MPs who I'm talking about would all be put to the side and would have new blood coming in.
A new crop.
Now, the new blood that would come in can be a man, can be a woman. You understand? Because at that point, we are not saying that the reform is targeting only the woman's seat. We are saying it is 2 terms for every member of parliament. It gives a chance to more people to be in parliament. It also gives a chance for everybody to feel like they can go to parliament. But when you target the women, this is where the problem is. If it comes to the issue of targeting women, we need to go back and look at the Convention on the Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, the CEDAW. CEDAW does state what those discrimination points for women were. Remember, from the 1900s, women were kept where? In the kitchen. And in their gardens, as it were in traditional African society, and never allowed into spaces of decision making. Of recent, we've seen many women join a lot of politics. Like now, I can tell you that for Chisoro woman member of parliament, there's going to be a by-election after the death of Mateke, and there are about 12 women who have come up to stand for that position, and I'm extremely impressed. You know why? Even a woman just saying I'm standing is good news.
Yes.
Because before, there was not even one woman who would say, I am standing. If you look at our LC5 chairpersons in Uganda,
There are only 3.
there are only 3 women. But how many local council 5s do we have across the country?
146.
Thank you. But we have 3 women. Why is it like that? It is because of the question which I'm telling you about the equity now. That there are still stereotypes that have to be challenged. When we talk equity, this is what it means. It means that there are things that existed from the 1900s that have never departed from our living spaces. That a man feels I will beat a woman as and when I want.
Yeah.
We had an MP from
Kaliro.
Kaliro, the woman MP of Kaliro, Margaret, the other day on Parliament floor, saying my husband picked a panga and he has been beating me senseless every day. The other day he beat me because I refused to sign on Theodore Sechkubo's censure motion of the 1.7 billion. She cried and she said, you know, I'm not even ashamed to shed these tears now because I know very many women go through violence. That is a question of equity. It means that violence still exists in our society. It means that more women need to come up for us to challenge this position of where women are thought of as second fiddle. Okay? We have not yet achieved. What happened to Cheptegei? She wouldn't have died. Why was she dying? Simply because she's a woman. So the man is saying, you want to take my land. It is a question of financial inclusion. And we're saying that when you look at questions of equity, they include economic participation, they include political participation, they include education participation, they include health issues. Have the women achieved on the health front? Don't we still have mothers who are dying while giving birth? Don't we still have mothers who cannot afford to look after their children for lack of economic power? We even participate in political processes because they do not have the finances. They're still there. And so if you bring a reform like the one Mao is suggesting on the woman's seat, then you are curtailing all the gains that have been achieved so far for the woman. And so I request government to rethink that if what we signed for in the CEDAW has not yet been achieved, because now the international instrument takes precedence over the national instrument. If we haven't achieved the gains for why we ratified the CEDAW, then we need to rethink that reform. It's one of the reforms that I want packed immediately. I know that there are women who have stayed there for 20 years on the women's seat. That is wrong, but we should find a way in which we get them out by saying this reform should target all members of parliament.
All members of parliament.
Not just the women seat.
Yeah.
The other reform which you want to think about, so what would be the process for getting this women reform happen? You need to talk to the constituency called women. After you've talked to the constituency called women, go back to parliament, look at all the instruments, look at all the equity and equality affirmative action, what it was meant to achieve. Did it achieve it? It didn't achieve it. Then decide whether that reform can work or cannot work. And that would be a grand process that takes about 2 years.
Sorry to cut you short, Charity, but just to clarify that the women have actually been consulted, at least by civil society. And I remember you were actually one of the key people when we were putting together the Women's Manifesto. So the Women's Manifesto is a voice of the women of Uganda. And the voice of the women of Uganda are saying, we need gender parity. You know what Charity is saying, and in relation to the 1.5 that is added to women as they go to university or young women, is that it has achieved to an extent, which is why it was reviewed. Whereas, you know, the affirmative action that we have for this quota of women, a district representative for each district, we have stagnated at between 33 to 34%. Every other parliament, we are at that level. Right now, we have 557 members of parliament, with only 189 of those being women, that as per 2021. So that shows you that, you know, even as you attack, you know, the women representative seat, you are actually attacking the constituency that is women. And so just to have this in place, to have equity, to have a leveled field of play, we need to look back at the age limit as well as the term limit across the board, as Charity was saying, across the board, and to achieve gender parity. The Women's Manifesto, and to know, you know, the Women's Manifesto put it clearly that we need to have 2 representatives per constituency, and we continue to say that each constituency should just be a district. Now, this is also collaborated in this year's opposition paper on electoral reforms to enhance good and democratic governance, which is why that means the citizens have said this, the women of Uganda have said this. We need to achieve gender parity. But also before just looking at the constituency, at the legal processes that Charity was taking us through, there are also some social processes that we need to look at before actually enacting some reforms. One is rebuilding citizenship. We need to ensure that the people of Uganda are recognized as the sovereign authority, you know, in the constitution. The other is about economic enfranchisement, and we continue to talk about this. We need to promote economic empowerment for all citizens everywhere. The other is election integrity. The election integrity, it just needs to come back. Strengthen the electoral laws and processes to prevent manipulation and ensure free and fair elections. How would this happen if in Uganda, for example, because for me, I believe this colonial structure that is Uganda now, we are still grappling, you know, with bad governance and issues stemming from the colonial structure, because the British disregarded the local and the grassroots and the indigenous way of organizing by Ugandans and just inserted and put in place their own system of governance, which is why I also believe it has been problematic over the years. Now, how do you return integrity to the elections when the president remains president even during a campaign? It means that if Honorable Charity or Cissy is to contest for president of Uganda, they are contesting against the state. Because they remain president, they remain in charge, so they use the state machinery. They are still the commander-in-chief, even during elections. And I don't know why this doesn't come up more often, Charity, because it means that every presidential candidate, every presidential candidate is contesting against the state. Yeah. You know, you still have the protection of the Special Forces Command. You still have access to the resources. You still have access to the National Treasury, the security, and you're also using, you know, the money as president. And so we need to have a system in place where if you are running for president, you are not president. You step down as from office, because you're a public servant. If we expect next year by June 2025, all public servants, all civil servants who want to contest in the 2026 elections must have resigned as per the Electoral Commission, the revised roadmap. And so the president is one of them. So we expect that by then, by June 2025, he has stepped down if he intends to be nominated in September/October of the next year. That will also level the ground just a little bit.
So what would that look like for the country? Essentially, what structures would we put in place if we are to, this is just a hypothetical question,
Yeah.
if we were to if we were to have the president resign by July 2025, June, July 2025.
This would be like a dream, and maybe my colleagues will take us through what the other countries are doing. I know that in some countries, the judiciary or the chief judge takes over, while in some other countries, if the vice president is not running for election, they are the president at that time. And so it would have to, I think it would also have to be a referendum, because as we said, the citizens should have the sovereign authority. Otherwise, we'll continue to grapple with that issue in the constitution unless it is tackled, but also the timing of everything matters really. And so it's just something that we need to keep looking on, but also, just going beyond that, when I go back to the gender equity and equality question, Charity was telling about the social norms and the reason as why we've stagnated at between 33 to 34%. Like, we've just never gone beyond that when it comes to women's representation in Parliament of Uganda. We still have the main seats, or the mainstream seats and direct seats are still called main seats, even when you go down into the district.
That's a stereotype that must be dealt with through equity. So that stereotype doesn't just go away. That when a woman says, I'm standing to be LC5 chairman, they will say it's a man's seat.
Because they say the word chairman, even LC1 right now, LC1 chairman. Yes.
They will say, that's
you have your own.
Because that is the equity I talk about.
Yes.
So if you say you have attained equality, have you attained equity? Have you broken the stereotypes? Have you challenged their position enough?
Yet the equality is also
thinking that a woman is as empowered as the man.
And yet the equality itself is yet to be achieved.
Yes.
And so we have many women coming to contest and they tell them, but you have your own seat. And that's also now the problem with affirmative action, which can be solved with gender parity, 2 representatives per district, a man and a woman. Gender parity, very quickly, because even, it's not even just women. When a person living with a disability comes to contest on a mainstream seat, they say, but you have your own SGI, special interest group seat. Why are you coming for this one? Or you have your own seat as a PWD, leave this one for the man. You have your own seat as a woman, this one is a man's seat. And so a lot of mindset change and civic education and voter education. And now remember, civil society even needs accreditation in order to pass on voter education. And yet we are just complementing the role of the EC. So, yeah.
Anita, though, I thought Georgia does raise a difficult constitutional process or difficult constitutional question on why the president remains president even during elections. The Constitution and those who made the Constitution actually took time to reflect on that issue. They realized that if a country doesn't have a president at a particular time, you could risk a number of things. You see, the nature of separation of powers, and this is not just because it is President Museveni, it's just because it is systems of governance, that you have 3 organs of government. You have the judiciary, you have the executive, and
legislature.
Does your speaker resign when she's going to go to be elected?
And the MPs
would cut across.
They
resigns.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what happens is that the House runs until almost the time of election. It's almost towards election that it looks like it's being dissolved.
A few months to,
And then it re-emanates almost immediately. Because there's a lot of business that takes place within the House, the Parliament, that affect the other parts of government. And so it is with the president. That if a country does not have a president, the only times the president cannot be president is when he has run amok, that is insanity. That's what the Constitution provides.
When he's
Or
dead.
when he's dead, and he must be replaced by the vice president will be running, or the Speaker of Parliament will take that office until an election is arranged within 6 months. But if the vice president is in good condition, can go ahead and hold the position for up to the time the election is conducted. So immediately elections have to be conducted, and they'll be conducted very shortly because we quickly need
A president.
a president. It's like saying you've cut off a head of a chicken. Will the chicken continue to live? It can't. It will be oozing. So when the members of the Constituent Assembly thought about what would happen if we asked the president to resign between there, they realized a lot of decisions wouldn't take place. So the judiciary can't function so independently alone without some things coming from the executive. So does the parliament. Parliament cannot act so independently without the executive. You notice that cabinet is always the one that goes to lay reforms before parliament, because they first start from cabinet, and cabinet is a function of the executive. So that is how we found ourselves with the president remaining president even during the times of election. The Constituent Assembly realized that yes, it could look like everything is functioning for this president, but if there is term limits, that is why they had put those two. If there is term limits, then maybe another president will be the one who will be there.
So it became glaring with the removal of term and age limit.
That is when you began to feel a lot of it.
But we also need to look at best practice for other countries where the president does not continue to be president. I'm not saying that we should have no president during that time, because it's like 6 months actually to the election. We would still have...
Because even Biden is still president. Even if he was running, he's still president. Even if he was still running, like if he was in this election and they're electing in November, he's still president. You get it? Biden is United States now, which has showed us how democracy is done. He was still president and he is still president. He hasn't left office.
They also have democratic issues. So I don't think they're the best country.
So they have democratic issues, but I'm trying to show you that in terms of democracy and in terms of how it is, you see, this is how a democracy works. It works on tenets. And the 4 main tenets are the rule of law, it is citizen participation, it is respect for human rights, and then it is elections, credible elections. Now, all these key tenets need a lead, and that lead always is in these 3 arms of government. That is how the propagators, people like Larry Diamond, people like Karl Marx, people like Montesquieu, these are people who during their time in historical perspective began to think about questions of democracy. And Greek leadership, they thought about all these things. The reason was, can we achieve with just these 3 arms of government, or do we need other functionalities coming in here? And if you see, is it only the president who determines respect for human rights, for example? No. But so what are the other people who are supposed to ensure respect for human rights? What are they doing?
The continued violence during elections, the arbitrary arrests.
Is it only him who is supposed to ensure rule of law? Actually, rule of law is the arm of the judiciary. But what have we seen in the judiciary? That is why Bobby Wine said, I cannot go to this judiciary. They are already biased. They are going to judge against me. And he walked away. There should never be such a time in a true democracy. Everybody should go to court knowing they are going to get justice. There's going to be fairness.
Hearing.
But maybe I don't want to take all the time for my sister.
Okay. Our time is actually fast spent. But Cissy, I'll just ask you one last question, and I'd request that you keep it, your reply a bit short. So, Georgina and Charity have mentioned something very important in their submissions. That is the role of the CSOs, particularly in these elections. For us to conduct, voter awareness, you need to go through a certain process. And yet, as Charity has mentioned, you cannot understate the role of the CSOs in these processes. So my question to you would be, how do we maintain the integrity of the role of the CSOs in these elections, in these campaigns, and then also have we seen any way that this integrity has been infringed upon?
My answer to the last question, first of all, is yes. And I'll refer to what Honorable Norbert Mao said in his own words. Honorable Mao said that he's in a kitchen and he is a chef. But this kitchen has a chief chef. And he tries so much to please the chief chef. You get it? So like from these reforms that he's bringing up, I believe he's doing it all to please the what? The master. And we all know that, okay, right now, a few years ago, I had a chance to meet the president. And when I was going to shake his hand, I took my hand to shake an old man's hand. I was very, very shocked. The way he held my hand, he had so much energy. And he surprised me. I'm like, oh my God, this is it, you know? So like back then, the president was strong. And he would move around, do a lot of things himself physically. Maybe now the president is tired and he has to use other people to carry out a lot of things for him. So that is why we have this Mao trying to, like what Georgia said, to bring painkillers to the situation. We have seen so much happening that jeopardizes the integrity of elections, of election officers. Look at the chief judge in particular. Sometimes he was misquoted or quoted, saying things he wouldn't say maybe on camera. So you cannot convince a Ugandan that we have free and fair elections. I personally tried to do underground work. I wanted to campaign for something. But up to somewhere I realized it is survival for the fittest. Like you have to be ready to do anything. To do almost anything. And for a woman, it's quite a bit difficult. Because one, you have to buy people using money, in kind, in a lot of things. So you can't tell me the integrity is not tainted. We have a challenge with that. And then for the civil society organizations, I would look at partnerships. Maybe they can partner with some key stakeholders. We are looking at the UN, we are looking at some organs in the government, and we are looking at the Speaker of Parliament. She's a woman, and I believe she would so much welcome, especially women-led CBOs, to work with her in empowering voters, informing voters, sensitizing voters about their rights and the rest of things. Yes, but as Ugandans, personally, I'm a Ugandan and I'm still hopeful that a lot of things will be done to improve the voting process. And some of the few things that were suggested by Honorable Mao are, yeah, they are good and they can be welcomed. But the process is not known because one, it's not elaborate. He has not come out to tell us the details of everything he has spoken about. So right now we are not in any position to welcome what he's saying. Maybe if he can buy us more. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Cissy. We have come to the end of the show, but I'm going to ask you all to give your brief closing remarks. But Charity, I would like to start with you. But as you are giving your brief closing remarks, I would like you to also speak to something that you mentioned very, very briefly. That is the fact that you all got into taxis to go to Mbale to make a stand.
Yes.
We've had in the current context, people have been a bit disempowered, and people feel that there is no point to any of these kinds of protests, whether it be or taking a stand at any level. I just want you to elaborate to us why we must take a stand at any level. History will look upon us and question, what did you do at that moment? And so even though, people have been arrested, people have been tortured, people seemingly it seems that there is no end, let's say, to corruption or anything of that like. But why must we take a stand? As you're giving your closing remarks, I'd like you to speak to that as well.
Okay, thank you, Anita. I think I want to close it here. Ugandans will still have to decide what type of reform they want. The leaders who are there and they're suggesting whatever reforms they're suggesting, including the Honorable Mao, he knows he acts on behalf of the people. And so people still have to decide. Civil society right now looks a lot discouraged because they've tried so hard and yet no one seems to want to hear. The top thing is, it's not about being heard. And an Afrobarometer research has elucidated that government is not listening to the people anymore. Afrobarometer released this research about 4 months ago and said the citizens tell government, but government does not listen to them. And we have seen it across. When citizens say we don't want corruption, it seems to escalate more.
Yeah.
When they say we want roads, then you see more potholes. They come big, leave soil inside, and then they become deeper. So what the citizens are saying is in contrast to what the leaders are doing. I think the citizens should not stop doing what they are doing. The reason why we sat in those taxis and went to Mbale, Anita, is because we felt that 40, 50 years from now, people will read what we did. Because when we came back, we documented, we wrote. We said we went to Mbale in taxis, we slept in people's houses whom we didn't know. The reason why we're doing that is because we're defending the Constitution as assigned to us in Article 3. Because Article 3 says they will not hold you accountable for anything wrong you have done if you're defending the Constitution. So they cannot take you to court and say you've committed a crime for defending the 1995 Constitution. No, they can't. Article 3 protects you as a citizen of Uganda. So every time you're defending the Constitution, Article 3 says they cannot arrest you. The people who were fighting against corruption, Uganda Human Rights Commission has come out and said, why are you arresting them? Because Article 29 gives them a right to assembly, but also Objective 27 allows them to combat corruption. And also the Article 17 on the duties of a citizen, one of them is fight corruption. So they were defending
The Constitution.
And Article 3 says, as long as you are defending the Constitution, you cannot be held liable for any action that you are engaged in. I think citizens need to know these things that exist in the Constitution for them. And for us as civil society, we need to make Article 3 stand out. We need to explain it in its broad sense to everybody to understand that we have a cardinal duty of defending our 1995 Uganda Constitution.
Thank you so much, Charity. Cissy, I'll let you give your closing remarks.
Yes, my closing remarks are in line with what Charity has just said. To the young people out there, let us take up the Constitution. Maybe we don't know many things in the Constitution. Like she's saying about the recent demonstrations we had, where people demonstrated and they were arrested. I'm glad that there are no crimes against them. Then number two, to anyone who can speak out, who can say a no to a public crime like corruption, voter bribery, please say that no. However slow you say it, it is much better than keeping quiet when something is happening. Because a few years from here, our children will ask us where we were when a lot of things were happening. Then the other one was about the Constitution still. Charity, you said that when they amended the Constitution, a lot of things were not amended right? Remember, at first we had 2 terms, but now we removed the term limit. So the standing president is again the ruling president. Still to the reforms, I think the time is not there to correct all that in the Constitution, because in a rush we are bound to make mistakes. To the Ugandans, please keep voting. You never know. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cissy. Yes, please, Shirley, your closing.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, my fellow panelists. Of course, there is no doubt that, ensuring that we have credible, free, and fair elections is going to take deliberate, non-partisan effort from very many actors. And just to say, if Honorable Norbert Mao, and this is to you, Honorable Mao, if you were honest, you would have tabled these last year, because we had an engagement with all civil society organizations in which you are among the keynote speakers that day. So this should have actually come very early last year, which would have been the second year of the elections. And so because I know that the time is really limited, as my colleagues and fellow panelists have so rightfully stated, my call is to the women of Uganda. The women of Uganda, we are the largest percentage proportion of the voters and, and the population of Uganda as I speak. And so I'm calling out to the women of Uganda to come out in big numbers to vote, to participate as candidates, to participate as agents, to participate as observers, protect and ensure that, you know, make sure that your vote counts, your vote matters, regardless of who counts, because there is a debate about actually counting your vote and making the vote count. Those two different issues, but to say that if we all turn up in big numbers and ensure that we continue to support women in leadership, we can actually make a change for the better. So please turn up, get interested in the revised roadmap so that we do not fall out and miss any process in the electoral cycle. Thank you very much for having us, and greetings from the Forum for Women in Democracy.
Thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of another episode of Women Speaking. I thank you for keeping with us till the very end. I think this has been I'm certain this has been a most engaging conversation, one that we need to keep on having, whether it be in our homes, in our workplaces, in our communities. We must keep on having this conversation. As Ugandans, it is our duty and it is in our best interests. What happens, politics affects everything, every aspect of life. It must not be looked at in isolation. So I encourage you in every sphere of your life to take interest, know your constitution, know your rights, know your politicians, and know what they stand for, and know what is being said about you, for you, and of you. My name is Turiho Danita. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.